Listen to me. There is a version of you he will come back for, and it's not the version that waits, breaks, or begs. It's the version that rises. Because nothing pulls a man back faster than the sudden realization that the woman he once assumed would stay available has outgrown the space he kept her in. When you stop collapsing into old patterns and start standing in your own authority, the balance shifts. You're no longer orbiting around him. You become your own planet with your own gravity, and that gravity is what pulls him back. This isn't about games, manipulation, or pretending you don't care. It's about becoming so deeply aligned with your own worth that his attention becomes a side effect, not a strategy. Men don't return for comfort, they return for clarity. They come back when they see you living in a way that forces them to confront what they lost. And that transformation doesn't start with him. It starts with you deciding that your value won't be negotiated. You must understand this. Every relationship that collapses leaves behind a moment, a split-second decision where you either shrink or rise. Most people shrink. They analyze, they replay, they create stories that trap them in confusion. But the strongest ones rise. They take the hit, feel the sting, and instead of dissolving, they sharpen. If you want a man to come back, you don't do it by proving your loyalty. You do it by proving your evolution. You become the person who no longer needs the relationship but can choose it. Desire is created through distance, but commitment is created through strength. When you step into your strength, you create both. Here's the truth people avoid. He will only recognize your value when you start acting like someone who has value. That means ending the cycle of seeking validation. That means stopping the just checking in messages that expose your insecurity. That means refusing to negotiate for basic respect. You're not trying to win him back. You're trying to win yourself back. And ironically, that is the exact moment he begins to return. Men don't chase perfection. They chase presence. They chase the woman who carries herself like she knows she can walk away and rebuild without hesitation. When you choose yourself with absolute conviction, you ignite a signal that he cannot ignore. Strength is not coldness. It is warmth without desperation. It is love without self-abandonment. When you detach, not from him, but from the outcome, you cut the strings that used to pull you into emotional chaos. You reclaim your peace. You step into routines, habits, disciplines that shape your identity. You become someone with momentum, direction, and purpose. He sees the difference. He feels it. The energy shifts. You are no longer sitting in the ruins of what happened. You're building something new. And that building process is magnetic. But understand this clearly. The goal is not his return. The goal is your transformation. His return becomes a byproduct of the power you reclaim. When you upgrade your life, you force everyone from your past to reevaluate their memory of you. You stop being the version they walked away from and become a version they can't reach without rising themselves. That's what brings him back. Not the crying, not the chasing, not the long emotional messages. Growth, progress, stability, self-respect, silence used wisely, distance used intentionally. These are the things that change the dynamic. If he comes back, it won't be because you waited. It will be because you moved. You went forward. You built a life that didn't rely on him for meaning. You stopped handing out access to someone who didn't earn it. You created standards that required effort. And effort is what awakens a man's drive. When you make your life bigger, richer, deeper, you become the kind of woman who can't be replaced. The kind of woman whose absence weighs heavier than her presence. The kind of woman he remembers at 2 a.m. when the silence exposes his ego. So do this. Raise your standards, raise your energy, raise your identity. You're not doing it to pull him back. You're doing it because this is who you were always supposed to be. And when he sees it, when he sees you thriving, disciplined, peaceful, focused, he will return not out of pity, not out of habit, but out of realization. The realization that you became the woman he should never have lost. The woman who didn't break when tested. The woman who didn't freeze when left alone. The woman who rose. That is the version of you he comes back for 100%. Your value becomes undeniable the moment you stop chasing and start choosing, because the second you redirect your energy from proving yourself to protecting yourself, Everything about you changes. You stop moving like someone desperate to be selected, and you start moving like someone who understands that they are the one doing the selecting. That shift is powerful, unmistakable, and impossible for anyone to ignore. When you chase, you communicate lack. When you choose, you communicate worth. And people respond very differently to those two energies. One makes them comfortable, taking you for granted. The other makes them realize they could lose you at any moment. The moment you stop running behind those who don't reciprocate and start deciding who truly deserves your presence, your silence becomes louder, your boundaries become firmer, and your confidence becomes unshakable. Every person who has ever underestimated their value has done so because they believed someone else's approval was more important than their own. So they chase validation, they chase closeness, they chase the hope that if they just try harder, love harder, give more, they will finally be seen. But nothing destroys your power faster than giving it away in hopes that someone will return it. Strength is not built through pursuit, it is built through positioning. You must become someone who stands so firmly in their own identity that no external rejection can shake your foundation. When you choose yourself, your peace, your limits, your non-negotiables, you step into a version of yourself that demands respect without ever having to ask for it. Think about what happens when you stop chasing. Your posture changes, your tone changes, your decisions change. You no longer tolerate inconsistency, half effort, excuses, or emotional crumbs. You stop waiting for someone to realize your worth and start aligning yourself with people who already see it. That is when your value becomes undeniable. Not because you shouted it, not because you begged for it, but because you embodied it. When you carry yourself like someone who knows they can walk away, you instantly become someone worth walking toward. People feel the difference between a person who needs them and a person who can choose them. When you choose, you reclaim control over your own emotional gravity. You no longer bend to follow others, you make them adjust to meet you. And this is the moment when people who once took you lightly begin to feel the weight of your absence. They notice the silence where your reassurance used to be. They notice the distance where your effort used to fill the gap. They notice the lack of access, the loss of privilege, the missing warmth they assumed would always be there. When you chase, people assume you'll never leave. When you choose, they realize you can, and that realization awakens a different level of respect. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you avoid love or connection. It means you do not abandon yourself to gain it. You set the terms of your emotional investment. You decide who is worth your time. You determine the standards for how you want to be treated. And because you choose intentionally, the people who stay in your life do so because they respect your strength, not because they take advantage of your softness. You create a life where you no longer barter your self-worth for temporary attention. You no longer trade your peace for the hope of being wanted. You stop negotiating over things that should have never been negotiable. There is a profound difference between wanting someone and needing someone. Need creates fear. Want creates freedom. When you chase, you operate from fear. The fear of losing them, the fear of being alone, the fear of not being enough. Fear makes you small. It makes you reactive. It makes you accept treatment that contradicts your own standards. But when you choose, you step into freedom. And freedom makes you powerful. It makes you discerning. It makes you protect yourself from anything that threatens your inner stability. That is the energy people admire, remember, and respect. People return to strength. They return to independence. They return to the person who didn't collapse when they walked away. When you stop chasing and start choosing, you become the kind of person who draws others back simply because your life continues to grow without them. They look back and see someone who became wiser, calmer, sharper, more self-aligned. They see someone who didn't fold under heartbreak but used it to build a stronger foundation. They see someone who no longer waits to be valued because they already value themselves. And this is the ultimate truth. When you choose yourself, you stop being replaceable, not because you're perfect, but because you are rare. rare in your certainty, rare in your discipline, rare in your refusal to shrink. Chasing is common, choosing is rare, and rarity is always valuable. Your presence becomes intentional, your attention becomes meaningful, your love becomes a privilege. The right people will rise to meet that version of you, the wrong ones will fall away. And both outcomes are victories. Detachment is not distance. It is control over your own emotional gravity, because the moment you learn to hold your center, nothing and no one can pull you out of yourself again. Most people think detachment means coldness, indifference, shutting down or pushing people away. But real detachment is the exact opposite. It is standing so firmly inside your own emotional world that someone else's behavior cannot dictate your peace, your mood, or your worth. It is the strength to remain calm where you used to collapse, steady where you used to break, and clear where you used to get lost. Detachment is mastery. And the moment you master it, you stop being controlled by your fears and start being guided by your values. People suffer the most not because they love deeply, but because they attach recklessly. They place their identity in someone else's hands and then panic when those hands shake. They cling, they chase, they overthink, they wait for a text, a sign, a reassurance, anything that gives them the illusion of certainty. But certainty doesn't come from others, it comes from stability within yourself. When you detach, you take back the power you once gave away. You stop depending on the emotional weather of another person to feel safe. You stop checking their every move like your heart is a hostage to their attention. You stop drowning in questions that only lead to more confusion. You rise above the chaos instead of being pulled into it. Detachment means you remain fully present, fully caring, fully capable of loving, but you no longer lose yourself in the process. You can love someone without collapsing into them. You can want someone without needing them to complete you. You can give without begging for anything in return. This is emotional gravity, the force that keeps you grounded even when life tries to shake you. When you have this gravity, you don't react impulsively. You don't fight for clarity from someone who refuses to give it. You don't chase what is walking away or cling to what isn't choosing you. You hold your ground. You breathe. You think. You act from intention, not panic. There is a strength people feel in you when you're detached. You radiate steadiness. You move with dignity. You speak with precision. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop proving yourself to people who should have already seen your worth. You stop fighting battles that drain your spirit. Instead, you protect your energy. You guard your peace. You choose your responses instead of reacting from wounded emotion. This is what makes detachment so powerful. It restores your self-respect. And here's the truth many avoid. People treat you differently when you're detached in the right way. Not colder, stronger, not distant, more self-led. When you're no longer emotionally dependent on their approval, they cannot manipulate you with inconsistency. They cannot pull you back with breadcrumbs of attention. They cannot confuse you with mixed signals. Your clarity exposes their uncertainty. Your calm highlights their chaos. Your emotional stability forces them to confront their own lack of it. People rise to meet someone who is grounded because groundedness demands accountability. Detachment is a form of silent discipline. It teaches you how to observe without absorbing, how to care without clinging, how to listen without losing yourself in someone else's narrative. You begin to realize that not every emotion deserves a reaction. Not every message deserves a reply. Not every person deserves access. You start choosing your emotional investments wisely. You start valuing your peace more than temporary comfort. You start prioritizing what aligns with your growth over what satisfies your insecurities. And in doing so, you raise your standard for connection. When you detach, you create the space for truth to reveal itself. If someone genuinely values you, they move toward you. They show effort. They communicate clearly. They show consistency. But when you're overly attached, your fear of losing them becomes louder than your ability to see the truth. Detachment clears that fog. It allows you to observe their actions without the distortion of your hope. It reveals who is willing to show up and who is only present because you carried the connection for both of you. Detachment shows you who chooses you without pressure. The best part is this. Detachment doesn't push the right people away. It filters the wrong ones out. The right person isn't threatened by your stability. They are drawn to it. They feel safer with you. They trust you more. They understand that you're committed, not clingy, loving, not dependent, connected, not consumed. Detachment makes you a stronger partner, a wiser friend, a more grounded human being. It builds resilience, clarity, confidence, and emotional depth. And ultimately, detachment returns you to yourself. It reminds you that you are the anchor, not the storm. It shows you that your emotions are your responsibility, your peace is your priority, and your life is too important to be tossed around by the unpredictability of others. You do not need distance to detach, just control over your own emotional gravity. And the moment you gain that control, you step into a version of yourself that no longer reacts, but responds, no longer clings, but chooses, no longer breaks, but holds steady. A man returns when your self-respect becomes louder than your need for him, because nothing is more striking, more unforgettable, or more magnetic than a woman who refuses to abandon herself for anyone. The moment you shift from craving his presence to protecting your dignity, the entire dynamic changes. You stop leaning, you stop chasing, you stop begging for clarity, and instead you rise into a version of yourself that cannot be dismissed or replaced. Neediness whispers. Self-respect roars, and it is that roar, calm, steady, unwavering, that he hears long after he walks away. Most people try to hold on by giving more effort, more attention, more chances, more explanations. But giving more to someone who is giving less only deepens the imbalance. It teaches them that you will tolerate their inconsistency. It teaches them that you will stay available no matter how carelessly they handle you. It teaches them that your fear of losing them is stronger than your commitment to yourself. But the moment you choose self-respect over emotional dependence, the lesson reverses. You show them that your heart is powerful, not fragile. You show them that your life continues with or without their presence. You show them that you will not diminish yourself to fit inside the small space they offered you. Self-respect is not a loud confrontation. It is a quiet shift. It happens the moment you stop participating in patterns that drain your spirit. It happens when you stop replying instantly to someone who treats you like an option. It happens when you stop overgiving to someone who underinvests. It happens when you stop proving your worth and start living it. And when that shift happens, he feels it. Even without you saying a single word, he feels the loss of access. He feels the absence of your reassurance. He feels the difference between a woman who fears losing him and a woman who knows she will be fine without him. There is a power in walking away with dignity, not to punish him, not to manipulate him, but to honor yourself. It is a declaration that you will no longer participate in your own suffering. And that declaration changes you. You begin to attract differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself with a grounded confidence that cannot be faked. Your presence becomes intentional rather than dependent. Your silence becomes mature rather than emotional. Your boundaries become strong rather than negotiable. And that strength is exactly what makes him look back. Men notice self-respect, even if they don't say it, even if they pretend not to care, even if their ego tries to downplay it. They notice when you stop running. They notice when you stop over-explaining. They notice when you stop trying to fix everything. And suddenly they are confronted with a version of you they underestimated, the version who doesn't crumble, who doesn't chase, who doesn't cling, the version who chooses herself. Self-respect is not about coldness. It is not about blocking him out of revenge or pretending you've moved on to provoke a reaction. It is about standing in your truth. It is about acting in alignment with your worth, even when your emotions try to pull you backward. It is about saying, I want you, but I will not betray myself to keep you. That is strength. That is maturity. That is the kind of energy that makes a man reevaluate everything he thought he knew about you. When you lead with need, you shrink. When you lead with self-respect, you rise. And rising changes what you attract, but it also changes how others respond to you. A man who once felt comfortable leaving will feel the weight of your absence. A man who once assumed you'd always be available will see you building a life without him at the center. A man who once took advantage of your softness will now face the reality of your strength. And strength is what brings him back. Not pleading, not persistence, not pressure, strength. But here's the truth that matters even more. The return is never the goal. The goal is who you become in the process. Because when you rise into self-respect, something incredible happens. You no longer need him to return. You may still want him, you may still care, but you stop depending on his presence for your sense of value. And ironically, that independence is exactly what makes him return with clearer intentions, with more effort, with a different level of respect. He comes back not to play, but to step up. And if he doesn't return, you don't collapse, you don't chase, you don't question your worth. Because a woman with self-respect never loses. She only learns, grows, and moves forward with greater clarity. A man returns when your self-respect becomes louder than your need for him, not because your silence manipulates him, but because your strength recalibrates you. And when you finally live from that strength, you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing the life, the love, and the future you truly deserve. Power is reclaimed through actions that prove you are complete, not waiting, because nothing transforms your life faster than moving like someone who refuses to pause their future for anyone. The moment you stop living in emotional limbo, hoping, checking, wondering, and holding space for someone who is not holding space for you, you step back into your own authority. And authority is not declared, it is demonstrated. It is shown in the decisions you make, the boundaries you protect, and the life you continue to build, even when your heart is tempted to stay stuck. Completion is not a feeling, it is a choice to move, to grow, to rise, even without closure, even without clarity, even without guarantees. Most people lose their power not because someone took it, but because they handed it over, piece by piece, by waiting for a message, waiting for a decision, waiting for changed behavior, waiting for love to show up in the form they hoped for. But every moment spent waiting keeps you emotionally frozen in a life that is meant to be lived. Waiting weakens you. Action strengthens you. And the moment you start acting from a place of wholeness instead of longing, your entire identity shifts. You stop being the person hoping to be chosen and become the person who chooses. Being complete does not mean you don't feel pain. It means you don't let pain dictate your direction. It means you continue becoming the strongest, wisest, most grounded version of yourself, regardless of who walks in or out of your life. Completeness is built through discipline. Discipline of your emotions, of your focus, of your priorities. It's waking up and choosing progress over paralysis. It's investing in your growth instead of shrinking into rumination. It's deciding that your story moves forward with or without the characters who left early. When you live from completeness, your actions carry a force that others feel. You walk differently. You speak differently. You stop chasing closure and start creating momentum. You stop clinging to what could have been and start shaping what will be. You begin to understand that your life is not waiting on someone's apology, someone's return, someone's clarity. It is waiting on your decision to rise. People respond to this energy. They sense that you no longer revolve around them, and that realization reshapes the dynamic. When someone sees you moving forward without hesitation, they are confronted with a truth. Your world does not pause for them. And that truth has power. Power pulls people toward you. Need pushes them away. When you act whole, you communicate that your value is not dependent on anyone's presence. You show that your dreams, your goals, your future are not negotiable. You show that you are not waiting to be rescued, completed, or chosen. You are already in motion. And motion is magnetic. It awakens respect. It awakens curiosity. It awakens accountability in those who once took your patience for granted. Completeness also sharpens your discernment. When you are whole, you don't fall for inconsistency. You don't cling to excuses. You don't tolerate half love or halfway effort. You become someone who recognizes patterns quickly and chooses yourself before repeating the same pain. This is what makes you powerful. Not the absence of emotion, but the presence of direction. You can love, care, hope, but you do not stop moving. You do not sacrifice your growth for temporary comfort. You do not dim your life waiting for someone to catch up. Your actions become the loudest statement of your worth. Not your words, not your heartbreak, not your explanations, your actions. And when those actions reflect a person who keeps building, keeps growing, keeps choosing themselves, something shifts inside you. Confidence replaces anxiety. Purpose replaces confusion. Strength replaces fear. You begin to experience the life your old self was too fragile to imagine. You start attracting opportunities, people, and experiences that align with the person you are becoming, not the person you once were. And here's the part most people don't realize. When you prove through your actions that you are complete, the people who once underestimated you begin to rethink everything. Your detachment hits their ego. Your growth confronts their choices. Your progress exposes their stagnation. Many will try to return, not because you waited, but because you didn't, because you became someone harder to reach, harder to replace, harder to forget. But even then, the power remains with you, because completeness gives you the freedom to choose, not crave. But the goal is never to make someone come back. The goal is to become someone who doesn't collapse if they don't. Power is reclaimed when your life becomes too meaningful to pause and too full to shrink. When you operate from completeness, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop dimming your standards. You stop betraying your own intuition. You start living with clarity, alignment, and direction. Power is not restored by waiting. It is restored by moving. And when you move with the conviction that you are already whole, already enough, already worthy, your actions speak a truth louder than any words ever could. You are complete, and you will never wait for someone to validate what you already know. That is where your power lives. That is where your life begins again.